theaters make presentations depending on the audience, depending on the time available. And they will present the pros and cons, but also what they do mostly is just present the facts. Yeah? They normally present a historical review of how it is we got here and why it is that we have reached this point. And we leave it to people to decide. Publicly, when I make presentations, I'm asked what is my position, and I have not told people what my personal position is. But like I said, other people complain about it, and they are demanding that we start going out in favor of the yes, or in favor of whatever. And really, the demand is more in favor of the yes, because even those who are saying no are accusing of saying yes. So then people say, well, why don't you just come out clean and say yes? But we do those things, and we do represent, to the extent we can, the views of the other side as well. But the whole point is to stick to the facts, not try to confuse it into what might be uncertainties, misinformation, and present it and give them an equal weight to what are the facts.
One of the things that I think we underestimate too is that this is the first time Belize as a nation, an independent nation, is having a standalone referendum. We're in uncharted territory. How do we do it? We are learning as we go along. And as a political scientist, which is one of the things I do in terms of my past, I'm so interested in how this is all working out individually, and I think the history of it needs to be written because it will set the precedent for future things. But this is the first time we're having a standalone referendum, and the process of doing it is one that part of it is being made up as we go along. We said we needed an objective campaign. We have one, but the stakeholders and the parties and the process and the dynamics are happening in a way that we have never experienced before. It is not a national election. It is not a referendum tied to an election. It is standing alone on the most existential issue. So we as a nation are growing up doing this for the first time. And sometimes that is underestimated as a part of our experience as a young independent nation.
Okay. So let's dive into the special agreement. And this has been of recent, a highly criticized agreement, a compromise, and people have called it many other things. They've called it illegitimate, illegal. And let's just go back. In 2008, I know, even on the show, we did an extensive coverage on this issue. And because there's more interest at this time, I think people really want to understand what it represents and why it's worded the way it is. So let's jump into that.
Well, I think that we know by now what the question is that will be asked in the referendum on April 10th. It's basically whether or not you support going to the ICJ to resolve the Guatemalan claim for final settlement. And there's a slide on that we have. But I think if we first of all ask the question, how did we get there? How do we get to the special agreement, which contains, as we know, the question that will be asked of the court and the process, if Belizeans vote yes, that the court will use to decide on the case. That many attempts have been made in the pre-independence and post-independence history of Belize to settle this unfounded claim. Mediation, conquest negotiations, recently facilitation through the OAS to get us to try to agree. All of those have failed. The last attempt happened between 2005 and 2007 that led to the special agreement we're talking about. And that also failed. But one of the assumptions that was made entering that was that if those failed, the Secretary General of the OAS could recommend going to the ICJ as a resolution. That is exactly what happened. The negotiations failed. He so recommended. And on the 8th of December in 2008, the two parties who had accepted by then at the executive level the decision of the Secretary General signed the special agreement. And the agreement basically then sets out the process by which Belize and Guatemala will go through to get to the ICJ, that is to have referenda. And if you remember, there was a protocol that was signed in 2015, which took away the requirement to have simultaneous referenda. Okay. It was not possible to do. That was one of the key things of the protocol. And so since that time, in 2008, and there has been, I think we should go back, Alexis, to because a lot of questions are around how it was negotiated. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And why, especially the wording of that Article 2. And perhaps we should focus some attention on that. If you could bring up Article 2 mm-hmm. on the screen, which is the question that would be asked directly to the court. Yes. And as Ambassador Rosado will say, because he was part of the negotiating team that helped to negotiate this agreement with Guatemala, mm-hmm. that this question was very carefully negotiated by Belize. The question had the advice of our legal advisors at the time, but it also was based upon the consultation with the Advisory Council on the Guatemalan claim, which I chaired. Mm-hmm. Some 15 Belizean representing different groups, some of them on their individual capacity. Mm-hmm. And it's the two more slides down from this one. Okay, and this question then, from the point of view of the negotiating team, is very legally tight. And perhaps, Alexis, you can talk about the part of it that is causing some concerns. We're
talking about the word determined.
The wording.
Yeah.
Well, the word determined, but any and legal claims mm-hmm. also, which I think are the two parts that are having mm-hmm. Concerns out there. Any and all legal claims and the term determined. Mm-hmm.
Well, those words tend to frighten a lot of people. Any and all legal claim, they feel, yeah. Oh my goodness, it's like going to a casino. I've heard some people say, you don't mm-hmm. know what to expect. You're gambling away our country. Mm. I've heard that said. And the truth of the matter is that because of Guatemala's claim, their position under their constitution is that the 1859 treaty mm-hmm. is no longer valid. They unilaterally declared it null and void in 1945-46. Now, since then, they have maintained that because the treaty is not valid, then there are no borders between the countries. And because the treaty no longer exists, then the country reverts back to Guatemala, because it used to be for Spain before their independence. Mm-hmm. So they inherited it from Spain. So now, in 1999, they kind of made an adjustment to that, and they formally wrote to then Foreign Minister, Prime Minister Said Musa, saying, well, Belize is now an independent country. We have recognized the right to self-determination, but we do not recognize the territory. So we can't claim the whole territory. So we are only claiming half, from the Sibun to the Sarstun, but we reserve our right to the other part of Belize. Mm-hmm. When we were negotiating the agreement, we said you need to put in what your claim is. But they could not put from the Sarstun to the Sibun, because then others in their country would accuse them of illegally renouncing the other half. Remember, the Constitution provides that they have a claim to Belize. Yes. But it clearly does not make sense. I mean, if you have recognized a country, a right of self-determination, you can't say they have no right to territory. Yeah. So we needed to put something in there. And they said they wanted to put something that is kind of really what we thought was wishy-washy. Mm-hmm. First was the point we needed to make sure of is that we need to make sure that whatever claim they come up with was based on law, that it could be tested based on the facts and the evidence looking at the law. Okay. So, and that's why we put the word legal. And the reason we put any and all is because we wanted to be sure that when we go to court, if we go to court, it will be a one-time only affair. You will not go to court with a claim, say Sibun to the Sarstun. You lose that case and then you come back afterwards. Some other government in the future will say, but the previous administration did not make a full claim to the country. So then we have a right to go back. By putting any and all legal claim and putting the word final determination, that makes sure that if we go only once.
One and done.
And it ends the dispute then and there. That was important to us because we did not want to have this. If we're going to deal with this at such level, we need to deal with it once and for all.
And it was hard to get Guatemala to agree to that.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to go on the issue of fairness and
what would have been the
grievance.
difference? Because we hear this so often, that the fact that we have gotten an agreement to go solely on the legal aspect, what would have been the difference?
Well, if the term legal wasn't there, Belize wouldn't most likely have agreed to this, because it is the factual and legal sureness of our case that gives us the confidence that we can go to the court. Okay. We are clear of title. We are clear that our legal advisors and from the various legal opinions have given us the arguments that we need to win at the ICJ. And so the word legal had to be there. We believe that Guatemala, with these words, legal, with the word legal, cannot win at the ICJ based upon all the facts and the legal matter.
In essence, the difference would be you have two provisions under Article 38 of the Statute of the ICJ. Article 38(1) provides that the court shall look at certain things on the basis of law. That is, treaties to begin with, customary international law. In effect, you have to prove by treaty that you have title. It's like your title deed. 1859 is our title deed. The next one is customary international law, and in this respect we refer to historical consolidation. Who has lived in the place? Who has been governing, administering the place over that period? And that will be interpreted. Those two things will be interpreted on the basis of general principles of law. The right to self-determination is a key part of general principles of law, and their own past decisions, precedents, whatever decision courts have made in respect of boundary and territorial disputes. That's what we have agreed to. The other option, which Guatemala had been insisting on, is to go under Article 38(2), which provides that the court would look at it on the basis of a term called ex aequo et bono. That means that the court would be able to look at it on the basis of equity, justice, historical fairness, and so forth.
If there were any grievance that they might be able to argue that was meted against
which was
them.
not something that Belize...
We did not agree to that.
Yeah.
And we need to look at the past too, because when the problem first arose between Guatemala and the British at the time, in the 1930s, the British told them, look, from 1937, the British said, let's go to the International Court. At the time, you had PCIJ, Permanent Court of International Justice. The British told them, let's go on the basis of international law. They didn't have Article 38(1) then. But Guatemala said, look, we're willing to go, but on the basis of equity and fairness, not on the basis of law. Put the law aside and let's just look at it on a fairness thing. Of course, the British said no. And from 1937 to 1956, the British kept insisting, let's take this matter to arbitration on the basis of international law. Guatemala refused. Because of Guatemala's refusal, we entered into all of those other things that you know about, mediation, Webster proposals, heads of agreement, and all of those things, because we were looking for a solution. Now, it's the reverse. Finally, we got Guatemala to agree to go on the basis of Article 38(1), that is law. Now, they have said yes. They have fulfilled all their constitutional requirements to submit the matter to court. And now it's us Belizeans who are left having to make the decision. Now, back then, a couple generations ago, the Guatemalans said no. And we were left hanging and carrying this thing here for so long. What will we do now? And that is the big decision that Belizeans are being asked to make.
The Article
It's a
2
big
that,
decision.
you've been explaining is essentially the very same question that Belizeans will be asked come April 10th. It's the very same question that Guatemala answered
Exactly.
last April. And the options are yes or no.
That's right.
Now, let's jump ahead a bit. And I want to ask you, what happens if Belizeans come out and vote no in this referendum?
Well, if Belizeans vote no, and this is based upon the special agreement, both parties have to vote yes for the case to go. So, first of all, the case will not go to the ICJ.
Okay.
That would be the first thing. So we would be back in a way to the status quo.
Which is what we have today.
Which is what we have today. And what we have today is basically a situation where our neighbor does not recognize our borders. We have failed through negotiations to get them to do that. We have failed in any other way. In a situation where we have a cost to not settling the dispute. The incursions, the logging, the illegal panning, the settlements, border incidents, the source tune is the biggest example. Those things will continue. They will be there. One cannot predict to what extent they will be worse or the same, but they will be there. So we will have to continue to have some sort of confidence building measures to deal with them. And I suppose one can also add that there are possibilities that, the government might say, well, let's try to talk to Guatemala again. But I suppose the short answer is that it is unpredictable to a large extent as to what would happen other than what is already happening right now. We're not quite sure how Guatemala will react. Will there be an atmosphere that people says, well, let's try this again in the next 5 or 10 years? But I think too, one of the things that some people are saying is that we would lose a moment, and moments as far as how things line up are very rare. Guatemala is in a position where it has voted yes, and it has come to a position that we actually wanted it to be in terms of agreeing to take a case to the ICJ on legal merits. Not using the moment that we have now to do that, some people would say would be losing it for some time. And so those are some of the things that I suppose
bring in one of the things that we've been hearing, which is the proposed postponement of the date of the referendum. I think one of the things we haven't really talked about was Guatemala did it. They changed their referendum date. They didn't feel they were ready, and so they pushed it to April 2018. We are hearing some people put forward a position that says, we are not ready to make this decision as yet, for whatever reason, and perhaps we should wait. Whether 1 year, 2 year, or the 25 years that's proposed to the deep freeze. Has this been considered?
Well, the decision to hold a referendum is a political decision at a particular date. So it's not something that we would be entertaining at our level. The important thing is that we've been dealing with this Guatemalan claim for generations, and we've been trying to resolve it for generations. Every leader of this country who has sat on the top seat, and even the aspiring leaders, have all agreed that this thing needs to be solved as early as possible. It would be kind of strange looking at it from an international perspective for us to say, well, we're not ready yet. And I understand people not being ready because it's a big decision.
It is.
We're never ready for many things, but we have to deal with things in any case. Most of us are faced with decisions that we have to make that we feel we're not ready yet. But that's what life is about, and I'm afraid that kicking the can down the road will not improve this situation of having a perfect education campaign. We will never reach such levels of perfection. We need to make sure that all that we can do gets done within the given period. and hope for the best.
And I think this is
I think the important thing, though, the important thing is not that anybody is being coerced into a kind of thing. I kept hearing people are being coerced into saying yes.
Yeah.
I don't know that anybody is being coerced into anything. You have a free decision, yes or no.
But I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of people are still not really confident into what the vote is going to be, because we hear about kicking the can down the road.
When we go to any election, nobody knows the result.
But see, the thing about this is that it is upon the country, and you did mention the moments. They have actually kicked the can down the road, and they have stretched it up until last year. So they did their thing last year. We are here in a position whereby coming up on the 10th, we need to go. Some folks are saying, you know what, we're not ready. And for majority, a lot of Belizeans will tell you, we still can't understand. There is no position. There is a yes position. We look at all the consulting. There's a maybe position. There's an undecided. We look at all the educational campaign, and it actually boils down into this one saying this and this one saying that. So people continue to be confused at the undecided, when we are only about 2 or 3 months away.
Isn't that the nature of democracy?
It is the nature of democracy, and I'm so glad that you put it, and I'm so glad that you put it that way. And I'll jump into what the naysayers are saying, that when it comes to the compromise, it actually waters down the 1859 treaty.
No.
And they continue. This is what the naysayers are saying, and this is on record. And I'm not saying that's my position here. Yeah. I'm not saying that.
It's what's being put forward.
It's what's being put forward. And I think these are some of the things that we need to explain clearly. When naysayers continue to say water down 1859 treaty, but the educational campaign, not the assayers, but educational campaign continues to say the 1859 treaty is a stronghold, it puts forward that undecided mentality. So how are we going to continue to deal with this issue leading up to April 10th, which is only 3 months away?
Let's use that as an example. Let's use that as an example. I referred earlier to misinformation. People are confused. I have invited those who make such claims to please share with me whatever study by experts on the subject of international law. Show me where the 1859 treaty has been watered down or whatever. Show me the logic and the reasoning behind your statements. I have not received any. So now, to put claims like that at the same level where you have practiced and respected international lawyers whose life is and who have built a reputation on this subject, and then you put them at the same weight. I mean, it's unfair to say you're not giving them space, but at the same time, you know it's not correct, and you need to call them out. And of course, many get offended when you call them out. You can't help that.
Determining the boundaries between their respective territories, the words that are in the question, basically mean confirming and reconfirming the 1859 treaty. This is what our case is based on. The key aspect of it, the central portion of it, we have a convention, a treaty that the British and Guatemala signed, that is legal, that is binding, and when it comes to our constitution, that is what we define ourselves as. And so determining the boundaries basically mean determining that the 1859 treaty, as we're saying it, is factual, legal, and gives us clear title to our land. That is basically what the question is saying. And that is what the courts are being asked to determine.
Determine the validity of the treaty, first and foremost.
Well,
not where our boundary lines are going to be.
Well, the 1859 treaty already delimits our borders. So the courts will basically look at the 1859 treaty as one of the things they do in looking at this comprehensive thing and say, as our lawyers have basically stated very, very clearly, that the 1859 treaty is correct in saying the this is where the borders of Belize are.
Yeah. All right, what we have to do, gentlemen, is take a very quick break. And when we come back, we'll have more on this discussion on Open Your Eyes. So please stay tuned.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. Channel 5 introduces the Daily Obituaries. The Daily Obituaries will broadcast all death and funeral announcements and memorials to honor your loved one's life and memories. The Daily Obituaries airs on Channel 5 prior to the evening newscast, with subsequent repeats at 10 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. It will also be placed online on our social media platforms, all for a standard package fee. Celebrate their lives and memories with Channel 5's Daily Obituaries. Honor in life and reverence in death.
And we are back. Of course, if you're just tuning in to Open Your Eyes, we are continuing a conversation with two representatives of the Referendum Unit, discussing particularly the special agreement and other issues as well. We're joined by Ambassador Alexis Rosado and Ambassador Vernon. All right, so let's continue the conversation. One of the things that we were talking about before the break is looking at what the possibilities are of a no vote, what the possibilities may be if we choose not to do anything at this point in time. John was asking you during the break, and I think it's a valid point, in looking at what the negotiation process is like with Guatemala. If Belizeans come out and vote no on April 10th, our only option, and this isn't my education campaign, I'm only assuming, you tell me, is that we have to negotiate with them once again.
I think the important thing is to, just in terms of the education campaign, it's all our education campaign. It's not just the government or the referendum unit's responsibility to do this. All of us have an equal share of responsibility and duty to our country. I think that's important to emphasize. In respect of sitting down and negotiating with Guatemala, it has been an arduous process. Guatemalan negotiators, just like Belizean negotiators, have clear mandates, clear positions that are totally opposite and contrary. We know each other's positions, and what we had to do is find a way to resolve it. And over the years, many attempts have been made, and all of those, as Dylan said, have not come to fruition, have not been able to be delivered.
So what you've said before in other interviews, I want to get to a point here, is that in negotiating, basically there's some kind of concession that has to take place. Guatemala wants, we refuse to give, if I were to simplify it. But with go ahead.
And that is the beauty about this agreement. This is the first proposed solution where we are not being asked to give away anything.
Agreed. But I'm still looking at the potential if people vote no. Now, doesn't the fact that we failed as a country to get our people to agree to go to the ICJ, doesn't it change the conversation with Guatemala that they know the ICJ is not an option because Belizeans simply aren't convinced that perhaps the negotiations as they have been before would be different?
Well, I think some things may change, and I say it with some kind of trepidation because we could be accused of fear-mongering. But the fact of the matter is that we have been the ones trying to get this thing halfway back. It's a convenient thing for Guatemala to keep a claim on Belize. It doesn't affect them much other than the international community every now and then makes declarations saying you're way out of line claiming Belize. But none of the declarations that are made by the international community are binding, so they could just ignore it. And that's what they've been doing throughout. Now, should we say no, many in that country will feel emboldened by their position. They'll say, so we have a claim, we have a valid, legitimate reason to be claiming your country. And after all those years where you have been very clear about your position, we have convinced the world, remember, that we have good title to our land. They will say, but look, wait a minute, Belize is not
you
clear
doubting
about
that?
their own position.
Yeah.
They have a doubt about their position. And
Well, that's one view.
where will the international community come? Because they have been supportive of us. They have been spending their own taxpayers' money in trying to keep the peace between the two countries. You have the agency office of the agency zone here. They spend millions of money over the years supporting us. What will they say? Because they will say, well, look, we have taken you as far as we can accompany you. Because you, Belize, have based your position on international law and general principles of law as prescribed under the International United Nations Charter. Our independence was based on the general principles of law, self-determination, territorial integrity, stability of borders, and so forth, things that we still proclaim.
Okay.
And now if we are turning our back on that same international legal architecture upon which we have depended for our independence and our territorial integrity, if we are turning our back on that, then what do we have next?
But you use the example, and you can definitely add into this, but you've used the example of a no vote in Belize being viewed by Guatemalans that Belizeans aren't sure. I think when people are saying no to the ICJ, what they're saying is, we are so sure, we don't need to defend it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I've heard some people say that the special agreement, as you mentioned, weakens our 1859 treaty. So some of them are saying that we have a weak case. In fact, I heard one of the members of the no camp saying that Guatemala's position is stronger than ours. I mean, I was flabbergasted that nobody challenges them on that, but said it publicly.
But the we are so sure so we don't have to defend it argument ignores the reality that a neighbor does not recognize our borders, continues to do so, and will not. And the negotiations have failed for the basic fact that they want rights and territory that Belizeans will never give them. Will that equation change in any future negotiation after having failed for so long? That is a question that I think that a lot of people have to consider. And evidence of the past, I mean, we look at the past, will tell you that a negotiated settlement in the current context, historical context, will not result in an agreement between Guatemala and a recognition of the borders. So the argument could be, if we are so sure of our title, this is ours, we know it, we can prove it in court, why not take this opportunity to do so? And that goes then perhaps, Marlene, you ask what would be the consequences of a no vote? What would be the consequences of a yes vote? And the yes vote, of course, based upon the special agreement, would lead to us taking, based upon that question, the case to the ICJ, where, because we are so sure of our title, because we are so sure we can prove it legally and factually, and because we trust this International Court of Justice to be independent and impartial, we basically are saying, in terms of the government and our legal advisors, that it is inconceivable that we will lose anything that we already have. And that in terms of the maritime areas, which, as I always say, even if Belize did not have a claim from Guatemala, we would have to have an agreement in the maritime areas. That we're also asking the court, if we get to the ICJ, to determine in the south where our maritime boundaries are, to delimit them between Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras. And that would be the outcome if we vote yes. And if we vote yes, then we can say that, and we get the judgment that we expect, that we will have a situation then where Guatemala, because it is a binding agreement, a judgment, will have to recognize those borders. The international community, the United Nations, which are members de facto of the ICJ, will be bound to recognize in a legal way the borders. Right now, remember, we have a resolution in 1980 from the United Nations, but that's not legally binding. But the ICJ, the legal organ of the United Nations, once it rules, the United Nations members will say, okay, you're right, that's Belize is right, this is where the border is. That will not solve everything in terms of
Well, I was going
incursions.
to say, I think a lot of people now have been paying a lot more attention to what happens in Guatemala, and what seems to become common knowledge now, especially with CICIG, is that, you know, binding agreements are not necessarily something that Guatemala sees they have to respect. Depends on who's in power.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to get a resolution from the International Court of Justice, because that has the power and force, legal force, of like giving an instruction, not just to the membership of the United Nations, but also to the Security Council. It is enforceable. And that's the difference.
Not by the ICJ, but by the Security
Enforceable,
Council.
yeah. People make, again, a big confusion. People said, but the ICJ cannot enforce anything. Of course, that is not their mandate.
It's the court.
It's the Security Council that enforces decisions of the ICJ.
So you explain the scenario to us. We go to the ICJ rules in our favor, and Guatemala still misbehaves at our border in the Sarstoon.
Well, to begin with,
What can happen? What will change between what is happening today and what would happen in the 5-7 year future?
The legal certainty that the court would have given when they rule in our favor, as we expect them to do if we get there, will give us the right to say to the international community, the Security Council of the United Nations, Guatemala is misbehaving. We will have more of a legal right, a moral right to get and address these problems on the border. Right now, we have a situation where Guatemala does not recognize the borders as we say they are. We will have a different context if the court rules, because the United Nations, the Security Council, will be able to say, Belize, you're right. And so the measures that they will be able to take, if in the unlikely, and I think it's very unlikely that Guatemala would ignore a court ruling after signing such an agreement, after having the international community all say that, yeah, we respect the ruling of the court. We will be in a better situation to deal with these issues than we are now, is the argument that is being made. And that is not to say that everything will be perfect, that all the incursions into Belize will stop. In fact, the more informal migration part of it, because of the supply-demand factors, will most likely continue. But we will be in a better position as a country to deal with them in a legal way, because we can say that you can no longer say that you don't know where the borderline is. And we will be able also, based upon the special agreement, to demarcate it, to go and to create a corridor so it is very clear where it is. And at this point in time, it is difficult to do that because it takes two countries to basically engage in such an activity. So we'll be in a better situation to deal with the problems that are now there. That is not to say that they will disappear.
Now, I hear what you're saying, and I think one of the things that we should be honest about is very simply, while we can say there's an unpredictability with the no vote, there's unpredictability in a yes vote as well. And I use this very same, I had this very question to former Foreign Minister Lisa Schumann, and I believe Eamon Courtney. Check my memory a bit. No one can say with certainty you will go to court to win. And we keep on hearing this from the education campaign. We keep on hearing it from government representatives. And I feel that Belizeans quite plainly feel they're being lied to, that they're not being given all the facts. You go to court under any other circumstance, naturally, innately, we know, even if I have a 99% chance of winning, what about that 1%? Tell me what the risks are of going to court.
I think you are conflating the local courts with the international court, and they are different things. I am sure they would have explained that part to you.
I agree with you, and I think one of the things we do have to consider is Belizeans' only exposure to court system is what we have locally. So the only lens we can see it through is through local lenses.
I understand the point, but that's why it's important for us to not fall into that trap. That's why it's important for us to make the clear distinction. The ICJ has a mandate under Article 38(1) to look at only certain things. It says the court shall apply. Yeah? Shall apply 1, treaties, 2, customary international law, 3, general principles of law, 4, their own precedents. That's it. Now, Guatemala comes to the court. The court will want to know, what is your position? Guatemala might claim the whole country of Belize or a part of Belize. It doesn't matter what they claim. What matters is how they can prove that they have any claim to any part of Belize. And how can they do that? One, the first thing the court will ask them, do you have any treaty? Because that is the court's statute, decided on the basis of treaties. Do you have any treaty to show? They will say, no, we don't have any treaty to show, because they don't. We, on the other hand, have our treaties. Secondly, customary international law. Who has been governing this place? Those are known facts. There's no uncertainty about what the court will look at. Of course, lawyers will argue everything.
But there is an interpretation that has to take place with the 1859
But everybody
treaty.
who has interpreted them.
But not the lawyer, not the judges who will make the decision.
Right, but if, based on the facts and the evidence, all the legal practitioners, the experts in their field, have reached the same conclusion, not just our lawyers, the Guatemalan advisors have reached the same conclusion as our lawyers, and the independent lawyers have reached the same conclusion. So there is always a risk. When you cross the road, there's always a risk that you could be knocked down. But you look on both sides, you know you could cross, even though there's a risk. And life is about risk. But in this case, we have done all the research, all the studies that we can possibly do to give us some kind of certainty. Of course, only the judges who write the judgment will know what they write. But in terms of what we have before us, it gives us a level of confidence. And that's what the lawyers have said. Nobody has said this is exactly what they will write. But it gives us a level of confidence that we have good title, full title to our land.
And that is something that I think that what I hear you saying is that in terms of the facts, and these are the facts that Ambassador Rosado has mentioned, these facts need to be shared more with the populace, the voters. And I believe there is time between now and the 10th of April to do that in the high intensive section of the campaign, when people are actually just beginning to get clued in and focus intensely on this issue. Everywhere I go, people are talking about it. The best time to educate is when people are clued in and want to know. And so do not underestimate what will happen between now and the 10th of April. I mean, in other countries, when they have referenda, usually it's a very short period of time that the actual intense campaigns happens, and this is what is happening. And there's a healthy debate going on out there. As we said, some of it is based upon inaccuracies, but this is what a campaign is all about, to do that. And we're in uncharted territories to some extent. But I think that going back to the ICJ, and Marlene, you were in The Hague with a group of other journalists. And I don't think that anything that has been said by Ambassador Rosado or others about the ICJ, you found to be incorrect when you were there as a group of journalists. I think Belizeans need to hear that also from people who have been there and seen it, and to diminish this sort of fear that, well, who are these judges and how can they judge and what are the risks? When it comes to our legal case and the strength of it that our legal advisors have indicated, our government has indicated, the lawyers, the judges will be basically looking at these facts, and as Ambassador Rosado said, using the court statute to rule and make a judgment. And based upon all that we know, the lawyers are saying we will win at the ICJ. And those are the facts that we have in terms of what the legal team is saying.
So in responding, and I'd allow you to respond, one of the things that the only former foreign minister who wasn't in the, who didn't participate in the declaration has said is that we need an updated opinion, or that the lawyers themselves should have representatives as a part of the discussion before we decide on April 10th. What is the status of that? Will we be seeing, first of all, who is the law firm and the lawyers that will most likely represent us? The last time I believe Minister Ellerington spoke of a company being on retainer already.
Yes, we have, since 2007, we got the legal firm of Freshfields, Brookhouse, Deringer, one of the large share law firms in the world, I think one of the oldest law firms in the world. We have been working with them throughout. Everything we do with Guatemala is based on legal advice. And what we have been doing so far has been also based on their own legal advice. We had Sir L.A. Latopact, who was our main legal counsel, but when the prospects of going to the ICJ became more of a possibility, then he advised, look, you need to get a full law firm that can do the case management, because this is pretty intense work. So he introduced us to Freshfields, and since then we've been with them. We expect to continue.
Will they be included in the education campaign in the next couple of months? Well,
you know, we got one of our legal counsel to be here last year, and he gave an updated opinion based on case law. Regrettably, it was not recorded. We did invite as much people as we could have in Belmopan. And we have been following the jurisprudence of the court. So what it tells us is that the legal opinion, the conclusions of the legal opinion of 2001, it just confirms it. The decisions of the court have further confirmed our position. Of course, it would be great to have a legal opinion, but I don't think we don't have much time between now and April to have something like that. I was very pleased.
So the lawyers are identified, or just the firm?
The firm is identified. We have been working with different lawyers around the law firm. So we have them already. We have some of them that are out there. But in terms of the size of our team, it's not a done deal yet. But we do have international lawyers that have been at our disposal throughout and will continue to be.
And so we don't know as yet whether or not they will be included in the education campaign.
We intend to. We intend to. I was going to say that I was pleased to hear yesterday that the Bar Association has gotten a legal opinion, and we look forward to hearing that. The more opinions we can get, the better, of course. The better it is. But our understanding is that the conclusions will not be much different than the original legal opinion of 2001 in any case.
All right. For me, you know, we continue to shed light on this educational campaign because we know the importance of it. And as a matter of fact, I'll just throw a plug in for Friday. This coming Friday, we'll be doing at 10:30. It's going to be a very special program that morning, whereby we'll be having a debate with the actually St. Catherine Academy. We'll be doing a debate, and thereafter they'll be doing a mock referendum. So that's something that we look forward to. One of the things for me that stand out, following Marlene visiting Guatemala, and people have been asking this question. Following Marlene visiting Guatemala, there were a lot of interviews that were sent back. One in particular, one that said, if Belize knows that their boundaries or their borders and boundaries are secured, and as a matter of fact have been defined, then why sign a compromise? You know, that's one of the questions that came out there, and it put a lot of people aback, because to a lot of people, he is right. If you know that you're safe, if you know that you've got your borders all right, you're an independent nation, a sovereign nation, then why sign?
You said if you know you're safe. Do you know you're safe with a claim hanging over our heads?
And that's what Belizeans are supposed to try to understand. But in Belizeans' mind, they're safe. They're an independent nation. The country is independent, and of course, the 1859 treaty states that, you know what, Her Majesty, this particular area, borders are defined. So why sign a compromise?
Guatemala does not recognize these borders that we know are ours. Guatemala has been acting over time, and the recent is in the source tune since 2015 in an aggressive way. We have not conceded anything in the source tune, by the way. On our western border, we have, on a daily basis, incursions for logging, for illegal activities. Even recently we heard about drugs coming over. On a border that is not recognized, these are all things that are amplified.
Not recognized by Guatemala.
Not recognized by Guatemala, of course. Now, there's also migration. These things are happening and are costing us. Diplomatically, we spend a lot of money on this issue. Our military outposts that we have had to expand, boots on the ground to try to deal with these things, have a cost. There's an opportunity lost for development that we haven't even calculated for this claim over time. And one could go on and list some of these costs that we're having that have to be looked at as one of the factors that we consider when we vote yes or no to the ICJ, and why we want our neighbor to recognize the borders that we say are ours and that we know are ours. And that will clarify, based upon the government's positions, and I think this has been over governments, to Guatemala and to the world, our borders, and that will give us a better opportunity to deal with all these problems that we have been having and costing us as a nation. It is something that we need to get behind us.
My final question, and I think for me, the Sarstoon Protocol has been an issue that has been consistently discussed. There was an agreement made by Guatemala. Many have said, why not pressure now for the Sarstoon Protocol to be signed before the referendum as an act of good faith by Guatemala, since they have already agreed to it, so that Belizeans can feel more comfortable that they will keep up with whatever agreements they have, and we feel that we have done sufficient work in being able to secure our southern border.
Yeah, it would be a great thing to do, and we keep doing it. We keep pressuring them. In fact, the whole international community. You were at the ACP meeting not too long ago.
Yeah.
Africa,
countries,
Caribbean, Pacific group of
them.
countries, CARICOM countries, a whole range of group of countries keeps supporting our demand to have confidence-building measures on the Sarstoon. And as you rightly say, Guatemala even agreed in principle that they were going to engage with us on the OAS, but they backtracked, like they have backtracked on the 1859 treaty. And that's why I say there's important distinction. Going to court where a decision of the court is binding and enforceable by the UN Security Council is what we need. Of course we know the 1859 treaty is valid. Of course we know what our borders are as provided for under our constitution. We know we have good title to this land, but as the land says, our neighbors do not accept it. So we need some enforceable mechanism so that when our neighbor decides to backtrack, then we could go to that body and say, look, this is going on. As it is right now, we do not have. Now we keep pressuring, we keep pushing. We have never stopped pushing for a Sarstoon Protocol.
What's the likelihood of getting a Sarstoon Protocol in place before Belize goes to referendum?
Well, we keep hoping, and every time we meet, we sit down and discuss it.
Can it not be conditional? When Guatemala had concerns with our Referendum Act?
You remind me of when George Price was insistent. They used to say George Price is pushing so much, let's postpone independence because Guatemala has a claim over our heads. And George Price said, if we wait for Guatemala to do such a thing, we will be a colony forever.
We're giving them putting a gun to our heads and saying, look, you can't move until we say so. Why should we prevent that from having us go to the ICJ to finally resolve this issue?
Basically, we will be telling them, you make the decision for us. Yeah. So then why have a referendum?
All right. Well, thank you for coming in and having this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by representatives of Belize to talk about the January promotions. So stay tuned.